Hi, folks.
Hey.
This is a welcome to our second session for Life as a PhD Googler. My name is Brendan Collins. Hi, I'm joined by Peter Norvig, as you can see.
Hi.
And we are going to spend today's session going over the ins and outs of what it's like to work at Google as a PhD employee. So the kind of overall agenda for today is Peter is going to talk about sort of the philosophy of PhD engineering here, especially as it pertains to software engineering. We're going to talk a little bit about the hiring process for a couple minutes, and then we'll spend a lot of time at the end to answer some of your questions. So as you can see to the right, over there, I think, is a chat window which is being moderated by a few of my colleagues. They're happy to answer questions as you ask them throughout the session today. And also, we will save some of the kind of best and most relevant questions for this group to answer at the end for Peter and myself, where I can help out as well. So one quick plug, if you haven't already, there is an RSVP link at the bottom, sort of right under us right here. If you haven't filled out that form yet, please do. That'll allow us to stay in touch with you throughout the rest of not only this fall, but into the spring as it pertains to internships and jobs and answering questions about research at Google in general. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Peter.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Okay. Let me just introduce myself. Peter Norvig. My title is Director of Research at Google. I used to be the Director of Research. Now, as the company has grown, I'm a Director of Research because we have several. But it's a little confusing because we have research as a organization within the company, but we also have research that goes on throughout the company. I came to Google in 2001. I ran the search team for 5 years and then moved over to research. My field has been in artificial intelligence and information retrieval and machine learning, and done a lot of things throughout Google. Let me try to tell you a little bit about what it's like. This is what we're going to go over. We're going to say what it's like to be a PhD at Google, how Google does research, what's it really look like, talk about publishing, and then talk about the hiring process. So, overall, what's it like to be a PhD Googler? Well, the answer is it's totally awesome. Okay, that's it. We're done. Goodbye. Any questions? Just kidding. I could say a little bit more about it. So I think there's a lot of things that contribute to what it's like. I think one of the most important things is the impact you can have on the world. So as a PhD, you have a lot of choices. You can go into academia, you can go to a startup, you can go to an established company. But at Google, there's, we've got a billion customers out there that you can help. And we have a pipeline and sort of a setup within the company where it's very easy to go from PhD research into production. The other thing that's great is the team that we have, the people you get to work with, and the autonomy, right? So Google is still kind of a bottom-up company, and people get to decide what it is they want to work on. There's a lot of fluidity and flexibility in how you manage your time and what you work on. Now, Google's approach to research. So I wrote a paper with Alfred Spector and Slav Petrov in which we tried to describe that. And mainly the idea is that we want to have a close connection between research and development and engineering and delivery. And we want to look for places where we're doing cutting-edge research, but we can apply that into products. I think there's 4 things that make it great to be at Google and why I said it was awesome. So one is the amount of data that we have. And I remember when I came to Google in 2001, so it was a small startup company. Some people had heard of it, some hadn't. And people were asking me, well, why would you leave your established organization that you were at for this tiny little startup? And is that really safe? And is that a good move? And my answer for why I wanted to come to Google, I said, well, remember Willie Sutton? Willie Sutton was a bank robber in the 1920s or so. And they once asked him, Willie, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. And when people ask me, why'd you come to Google? I said, because that's where the data is. And we didn't have the word big data then, but I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I knew Google was the place to do it. Now, on top of having the data, you also need the infrastructure. So that's the hardware, the data centers, as you see here, to process that data, and the software. I think it's pretty important that the software is easy enough to use that even a PhD can do it, right? So in some companies, there's a separation between the production engineers that run the complicated stuff and the PhD researchers that play on their laptop using R or MATLAB or something with smaller data sets. At Google, some people do that at the very beginning, but then you quickly get to the point where you say, I could do a lot better if I used all this data that we have, and it's easy enough to use that I can do that. I can use the same production systems that are used for our production applications. I can use that as a researcher, and I can get at a copy of the web or all the data I need for whatever it is I'm trying to do. And the software makes it very easy to do that. So that's great. And then the other thing, we talked about impact before. There's a billion users out there. And so you can build something and get the satisfaction of knowing that you're really helping people. And finally is the incredible colleagues. That there's other great people working here, and you get to work with them. So those are the four things that are important. That's what it's like. Now, what can you do? Well, here's all the research areas, and I won't read through them, but basically, anything you see in an academic CS department, we're probably doing it. So what does research at Google actually look like? So here's a diagram of the intersection of basic research, so striving for fundamental understanding of the world, and applied research, trying to build something that's actually going to help people. And Google research is kind of right there in the middle. And we talk about that in our paper. There's another book out by Ben Schneiderman, the professor at University of Maryland. I forget the title of the book, but it's something about ABCs, which is applied and basic research combined. So he has a very similar idea that, he says that there was kind of a myth that the key to doing good research is to fund basic research. But he said that was never really true, that all the best research has always been this combination of applied and basic. And that rings true to me. So I would recommend Schneiderman's book. And so this hybrid approach, combining the basic and applied, we're focused on technology transfer. So our goal is not to prove theorems or write papers. Our goal is to make it a new product in either improve an existing product or invent something entirely new and get that out in the hands of users. We usually do that in small steps, right? So we don't say, I got a plan and I'm going to deliver something 10 years from now. We say, you can still have a 10-year plan, but you can say, along the way, this year, here's what I'm going to ship, and then next year I'm going to do the next step, and so on. We can use all this infrastructure that we have in order to do experiments, right? So we don't have to just think about things, we can actually try them out. And we're allowed to think about hard problems, but we're evaluated by, does it actually work at the end? Now, another aspect that's sometimes confusing is that we have an organization within Google whose title is research. So you look on the org chart and there is research, but there's research going everywhere throughout engineering. And a lot of the well-known researchers that you may be aware of, people like Jeff Dean and Sanjay Gemawat, their title is not researcher, their title is software engineer, because it just happened of where they sit within the organization. We go more, your title of whether you're researcher or engineer doesn't really depend on how academic you are, doesn't really depend on whether your projects are shorter term or long term, depends more on the area that you're in. So if you're in an area of something we're already doing, like systems programming that Jeff and Sanjay were doing, then your title is engineer. If you're in an area of something brand new, then your title might be researcher. But in the end, it doesn't matter what your title is. What matters is what you work on. And we have a couple different models for how teams work together. So here's one example where an engineering team comes up with research results and new products. And an example of that might be the MapReduce or the big table system that Jeff and Sanjay and others worked on, where they're officially engineers, they invented something new, and they shipped it as a product. Here's another example where a research group comes up with research results and ships the new products as well. So examples of that might be the machine translation and the speech recognition systems, which started with a small team, just a couple people in research saying, hey, let's pursue this. They got some good results. But rather than handing that off to an engineering team, because we wanted to keep developing it, especially with examples like that, where every month or so we were adding a new language. We didn't want there to be one research system and one engineering system and have to keep the two synchronized. We wanted there to be one system, so we kept the whole development within research, and we just added engineering support to be able to ship the product and develop the system as we went. Here's another example is a research group might come up with a result that an engineering team who they aren't working directly with then picks up and says, hey, this is exactly what I need. So an example of that might be the fingerprinting techniques for audio and visual that was done by Michelle Cavell and Shamit Baluja. So they had this technique for saying, is this YouTube video, is this a match for something else? And of course, if it's a bit for bit match, that's easy. Anybody can do that. But what if it's somebody with a camcorder who sneaks into a movie and records off the screen, and it's a noisy copy, and in the middle there's somebody with a box of popcorn who walks across the screen. But that's still, we want to detect that as copyrighted material for whoever owns the movie. So it's an approximate match. They came up with techniques for doing that approximate match, published the research results, and then the YouTube team picked that up and said that was important, and the music team also said we want that too to match against audio tracks, and those teams were able to work from the basic research to develop the product. And finally, there are examples where we have research group and engineering teams coming together to form one team and work on new products. Example of that might be the ads optimization, where we had experts in machine learning from the research team go and join with the engineering team and say, we're going to figure out what's the right ad to show so that users get better, more interesting, less annoying ads to look at. Okay, what about publishing at Google? So first of all, there's a big difference between industry and academia in that academia, it's publish or perish. It's an important part of what you do. You get evaluated on it. If you don't publish, you don't get tenure. That's the end of the story. At Google, you're evaluated by the products that you produce, right? So we said we had this applied focus, and we want you to develop something. And of course, we looked at all those different models. You can be a success in any one of those models. So you don't have to always deliver the product yourself, right? So some of these, I came up with a good research result that was important and it was used by somebody else. You still get credit for that. So there's lots of ways to get credit. But you're not going to get credit for publishing alone if those publications aren't interesting to anybody, don't lead to any products. You do get credit for publishing as an addendum to everything else that you do. So it's something we value very much, and we encourage you to do it, but it's not the primary thing you're evaluated on as it is in academia. And despite it not being our number one focus, we still do a lot of publication, and here's a bunch of different areas, and this is all on our website, so you can go look at them. And then beyond publishing, there's other ways to be involved with the community. So we're involved with a lot of open source projects. People here spend time on that, work with the open source community, develop and release these systems, maintain them, lead the community. I had a great experience with the Google Summer of Code, where we get some students to help work on an open source project, and I managed a couple of them over the summer. That worked out great. We also have people working on defining industry standards. We have our own internal APIs for things like object recognition API, where you say, give me a picture and I'll give you back labels for that picture. We collaborate with colleagues in academia through visiting faculty, through a research grant program, through inviting people in for tech talks, through going through conferences. So lots of opportunities to stay up to date with the academic community. Okay, and now let's go to Brendan and talk about the hiring process.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. So a little bit about the sausage making of hiring. This is the big fall hiring season. We're in the midst of it. So thank you to everyone who's watching right now, because I'm sure that's of interest to probably most of you. So as Peter mentioned, PhDs are embedded sort of within every major engineering team. And so it shouldn't surprise you as well that we have PhD Googlers working at most of the main engineering offices in North America, and they're listed here. So let's talk about how to apply. Drum roll, please. It's the easiest thing in the world. Google.com/students. That is your one-stop shop for finding information about internships. That's where you can find info about full-time roles. That's where you can find resources about how to interview. That's where you can find more information about scholarships. It really is kind of the only address you need to know if you want to talk to Google about possibly working here or getting more involved with the company. To apply, and you have to apply online. It's insufficient to hand off your resume to someone at a career fair. You do in fact have to go onto the student job site here to apply. But all you need to get the party started is just upload your resume and an unofficial copy of your transcript, and then click submit. So a few of the deadlines and things to note about the software engineering roles for PhD students that we have here. If you are going to be graduating anytime between now and next May or June with a PhD, you do not need to apply at any particular time. There is no deadline. We hire throughout the year. And it's not even like there's a rolling admission. It really is no deadline. If you want to take some time and practice doing technical interviews, we strongly encourage that, because in the midst of research and sort of finishing up your dissertation, it can get lost that you do in fact need to do a coding interview, at least one, to work at Google as a software engineer. And we'll talk a little bit more about the interview process in just a bit. But if you are looking for an internship as a software engineer with us next summer, the application is open and it closes on January 31st of next year. So that internship application is in fact is kind of much more of a rolling admission. So we encourage you to apply as soon as you feel ready to get started with the interview process. And once you do apply, you'll get an automatic email from Google Recruiting saying, hey, thanks so much. We really appreciate you signaling your interest. If we want to move forward, we'll be in touch. And so if a recruiter reaches out and says, hey, thanks so much for applying, we'd like to interview you for a software engineering internship for your PhD students next summer. At that point, you have a little bit of flexibility to say, okay, here's my availability, or I have to go to this conference on this date, so that date won't work. The recruiting team is really flexible. So just be as honest and transparent with them as you can, and they'll treat you well. So a little bit more about the actual interview process. It differs for interns and full-time, more of in tactics than in strategy, though. So for an internship, the only interviews you'll do are over the phone. And these are technical coding interviews. So if you haven't had a lot of experience doing coding interviews, I strongly recommend practicing. the best way to do that is to get your hands on some mock interview questions, such as those that you can find in the magnum opus of tech interviewing called Cracking the Coding Interview. Volume 6 just came out, or the 6th edition, excuse me, came out last year. The 5th edition is still just as good. The questions are a little older, but that's no real difference. And doing tech interviews it can be tough if you haven't had experience, which is why there is no shortcut to getting better. You do have to practice. After the phone interviews, if the engineering sort of hiring committee thinks that things look good, they will put you into the host matching process, where your interests will be shopped around to the different teams at Google throughout the company that are looking for folks who have experience such as the kind that you have. So Google's approach to internships is incredibly curated and manicured. We don't just hire interns for the sake of hiring interns. We hire interns to do very specific work that is of great business need. And you are not just working on some project that is going to gather dust as the second you leave the office. Every internship at Google, every engineering intern, you work on production level code. And so you're right there in the trenches with the rest of the teams working on the stuff that keeps the lights on here. So after that host matching process, if they find a match that works for you, and that also, if you work for the team, your application is put to that hiring committee, and if they think it all looks good, then they extend an offer. For full-time, it's similar, but it's a little bit different. The first step of the process is also 1 or 2 interviews over the phone, but it's a little bit more robust after that. If the committee decides to move forward, and the recruiting team as well, they will fly you out, most likely to our Mountain View headquarters, where Peter and I are right now, and you will do 4 or 5 interviews on site. It's more than likely that 4 of those interviews will be technical coding interviews, similar to the ones that you did on the phone. But there's also a research interview, and that is usually tailored to your particular focus area. And the interviewer will be someone who is also pretty experienced in the field that you're working in the field that you're sort of hoping to continue working at once you join us here at Google. After those interviews are finished up, they're all sort of calibrated against each other by that same sort of committee type approach where, if you do really well in one interview, that's not going to guarantee you a job here. But this, on the same flip side of that coin, if you feel like you didn't do very well in one of the interviews, that's not going to necessarily rule you out. It's designed to be as fair and an approval as we can make it. So if the committee decides that it looks good, that's when we hand out the offer. So at this point, we are going to move on to the Q&A portion. So my colleagues have been diligently answering the questions in the chat window. Thank you very much to colleagues who are in another conference room around the corner from us. But we have some questions that they have collated from the chat window that would be really good to have answered in front of everyone watching today. So the first one, is all research at Google focused on production, or is any research specifically for the purpose of licensing?
We don't really do much in terms of licensing. I think we want to take advantage of the scale that Google has and say, we've got those billion customers out there, and we want to go direct to them. And if you put something behind a license, that just kind of mutes the impact. I guess there probably are a few cases where we do stuff to help out some of our partners. So I'm thinking things like the phones. Yesterday we released our own phone, but there's Android phones from lots of different manufacturers, and sometimes we do work to help them out with problems that they're having. So you might think of that as licensing, although I don't know if that's exactly what you want. But mostly we want to go to our customers.
Okay, here's a good question, and this comes up a lot with recruiters, is will you focus on the published papers of an applicant more than their engineering skills when considering them, especially for students who are maybe in the first 2 or 3 years of a PhD program?
Right, so it's not a competition to see who has the most publications. What we want is we want you to demonstrate that you can do the job, and there's lots of different ways that you can do that. So one way to do it is to have a strong publication record. Now we know You can take an assignment and you can do a good job on it, and you can write it up and you can finish it and move on to the next thing. So you've proven yourself that way. But there's lots of other ways you can prove yourself without doing publications. So if you've done an open source project and contributed to that, or done your own software project and finished it, even if it's not written up as a publication, if you've shown you can do the job, then that's great.
Okay, and you touched on this a little bit during the slides, but what's the main difference between a software engineer and a research scientist?
So in terms of day-to-day, I think there's not that much difference, right? So everybody's working together, and you pitch in and you do what you have to do. One time I answered that, and that the main difference is not when you're on the job, but when you're done with the job, right? So if I, as a manager, have a talk with my employee, if that employee is a software engineer, then we usually start out the conversation with me saying, hey, I have an idea for what you should do next. But if it's a researcher, then maybe we might start with the researcher saying that he or she has an idea for what she wants to do next. And then I'll agree to that. So it's a little bit more flexibility in choosing your own direction. If you're a researcher, you've shown that you have the ability to do that. But once you're on the job, a lot of times you can't tell the difference of who has what title.
That's refreshing to hear. Yeah, titles don't matter that much once you're in the door. Okay, another question. Are there specific research or applied research teams at Google focusing on large-scale machine learning, distributed optimization, or will we be absorbed into specific machine learning teams that already exist?
Right. So that's a great question. So we do it kind of at all levels, right? So there are tools that we work on. TensorFlow is probably the biggest tool, and there a big part of that is the distributed systems type part, and other parts is sort of the core machine learning algorithms part, and that's building the tools, and it's across the board. Then there are teams whose main job is to do machine learning to solve a specific problem, to do speech recognition, image recognition, whatever. And I guess that's the second part of your question. And then there's also teams where their main focus is something else, right? So they're trying to ship a piece of software, and they've got 10 major problems before they can get it out the door, and maybe machine learning is number 9 on that list, but they still need somebody to help out and get that part done.
Okay, what is a recommendation for someone in their first year of a PhD program who may not have a lot of publications? And this is similar from an earlier question, but I think that first year of being a PhD student, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so I guess the good thing is for first year, we're comparing you to other first years, right? So we're not expecting you to have a lot of publications. Again, we're looking for somebody who can do the job, and so somebody who's flexible in terms of their ability to be able to program up something new, to be able to read and understand, be able to work with other people on the job, to know how to use the tools, source control systems, and so on. And if you can demonstrate you can do that, then you're well on your way to saying you can be a valuable member of the team, even if you don't have a lot of publications yet.
Okay. So here's a question, and I hear this one a lot from students, is I'm concerned about taking a software engineering role because I'll just be coding all day instead of solving big problems. How do you respond to that?
Right. So again, the titles don't matter, right? And everybody's solving big problems, but everybody has to code in order to get there. So I think you should look at the group you're going to be with, and talk to them, talk to your manager, talk to the other people on the team, try to understand what the project is going to be like, and don't pay any attention to the titles, because as I said, a lot of our well-known people like Jeff and Sanjay, their title is software engineer. That didn't bother them. But I got to say, I wish we didn't have these two different titles, and I'm envious of places like Bell Labs in the old days, where they had one title, member of technical staff, And I wish we had that, because then I wouldn't have to answer this question, because it comes up a lot in hires, and some of the hires are disappointed that they got one title or another. Now I'm in research, so the people I hire have the title of researcher. But when I was doing search, the people I hired had the title of software engineer, even though they were doing research in how to get the right answers for Google. So they were at the core of researching everything that Google did. But every one of the people that I hired had the title software engineer. And a lot of them, fresh PhDs, complained. And I said, this is just the way we do it. And then, a month later, they come back to me and say, oh, I'm sorry, I complained about that. Now I understand that it makes no difference whatsoever.
Yeah. It's a definite first world problem for sure. Okay, this is a good question, especially coming off of yesterday's launch with the new hardware devices that we have. Given that machine learning is such an enormous focus for the company for the short and long term, do you need to have machine learning experience in order to work on machine learning problems?
Right. So again, I said there's multiple ways in which machine learning fits in. And there's a lot of teams for which it's not their main focus, but they need to do a little bit of it. And for that, you might be the person on the team that gets assigned that, and that's fine. We certainly hire people that have the mathematical skills, but not necessarily the experience. And so, a lot of the machine learning that's common now is really just manipulating matrices. So if you can do linear algebra, then you can do machine learning, and the rest you can learn on the job.
And that's kind of a recurring theme of hiring at Google at large is we don't necessarily hire people who are pigeonholed as being really, really strong in one area. We hire folks who are incredibly good at learning on the job because we know that when we hire that way, we are making a bet on the future of the company and not necessarily on that one team that needs that one person who's good at that one thing at that any given time.
Yeah.
Okay. So related to that, actually, there's a perception that at Google you might not have a lot of choice when it comes to the project you're working on. How true is that?
So when you come in, you're usually assigned to a project, and there may not be that much choice there, although we are able to do some accommodation. But then you're very free and, in fact, encouraged to switch over time once you get here. We have internal tools and marketplace where new jobs are advertised, and people look at that and they move. And, in fact, the main problem we have is that people don't move enough, right? So we want them to go on to the next project, and people say, oh, yeah, I will, but first I want to finish up what I'm doing here, and it'll take another quarter or so. Because we want that experience to spread throughout the company. We want connections, both personal and technical, to be made, and to have that diversity. And we don't get that when people just stay on one thing forever. So you'll move around a lot, and you'll have a lot of choice in where you go and what you want to do next.
And it shouldn't surprise anyone on this call, especially, that there are a lot of extremely talented behavioral science PhDs working on Google's HR team. And the science is clear about the benefits of internal mobility, because not only, to your point of does the company benefit from having new people in to stir the pot, but also you want to have employees happy at work. You want to have them in charge of their own careers. And Google does a fantastic job of facilitating that conversation with your manager, with your HR representative. There's an internal jobs board that, if teams are shorthanded, they could say, oh, we're looking for this one person. And kind of related to the idea of a 20% project at Google, a lot of times, 20% it's not like codified in stone. It's pretty flexible as far as a principle of work sharing and kind of focusing on individual projects versus team projects. But the core idea of doing stuff that makes you happy is baked into the DNA of the company from its culture from day one. And that has not changed at all. In fact, in the 6 years that I've been at Google, I personally have switched teams 4 times. And I've gone from one org to an entire other org in the company. And, it's one of those situations where everyone is scratching everybody else's back because the team is happier to have new people on it who come with a breadth of experience from another department or another division. And then the people moving are also, they know that they are sort of driving the bus of their work, of their careers and their lives. and it's really important to Google that people are happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Oh, here's a logistical question. When should we apply for internships? Should we wait to pass qualifications or wait until after we defend to apply? So there's two answers for this. I can take the first one. Is internships at Google for every part of the company are only open to people who are going to be returning to school. So you have to do at least a couple more months of school. I know for PhD it can often be difficult to plan out when exactly your graduation day is. Mm-hmm. But you can, if you do want to have an internship here, you have to go back to school for at least a preordained amount of time. And your recruiter can, if you have questions about that and you apply and you're moving through the process, the recruiters can answer those questions on a case-by-case basis. But the window for applying for internships is only open until January 31st, so you have to apply at some point between now and then if you do want to get an internship here next summer. I mentioned it is kind of a rolling admission, so the sooner you apply, the better position you put yourself in to be sort of, have your application on the top of the pile once, in theory, a really good fit for you comes online, and the recruiting managers can say, oh, hey, this great internship kind of just... you fit the mold perfectly. Good thing you applied early and you're through the interview process, and we can start that host match. So the sooner you apply, I think, the better position you put yourself in for sure. Okay. So this is a cool question. What drives research projects at Google? Mm-hmm. What is the kind of the starting spark? Like, what is the kernel of ideation? How does that happen?
So it's sometimes it's improving existing product that we have, saying, we have search results, we want better ones, we have speech recognition, we want that to be better, and let's look at the current state of the art and say, what can we do? And sometimes it's something entirely new, where we say, we think there's a new technology that we're not doing yet that could be really transformative. And one way to think about it is that a good research project is something that you should be able to go to a product manager and in 30 seconds say, here's a technology that I have, do you want that? And to have the product manager be really excited, right? So things like machine translation. You could say, well, I have the ability to have people understand stuff that's not in their language. Would that be useful? And the product manager says, that's fantastic, I want that. So we look for those types of opportunities where we can apply the skills that we have. We look at the current state of the art throughout the world as well as internal to the company, and we say, where can we make a difference?
And I think it was on display in a wonderful way yesterday with the big product launch that we had. And I was talking to one of your colleagues yesterday who said that it's amazing how Google went from starting Android phones 2008, 2009 to today, where the amount of patience that the company had for that great idea of how do we design and build the best phone that we can. It took Google a long time to get from then to now. Mm-hmm. And if the company was driven by short-term returns on investment, we never would have gotten as far as we have on that front. Okay. Here's another cool question. Does research at Google need to go through a sanitation process before it can be published? Mm-hmm. If so, how difficult is this?
Right. So we do have a review process for every publication, and we're looking for a couple different things. So one is don't say anything that's so bad it will embarrass Google. I know that anything you'd want to publish wouldn't have that problem, so that's fine. Another is, are there copyright type issues? Did you steal some photograph that you don't have the proper rights to? So we have to clear all that up. And then the third is there anything proprietary that you're talking about that you shouldn't be talking about? And that sometimes comes up. It's usually pretty minimal. And it comes up in a couple ways. Sometimes we can talk about a technology without saying exactly how we do it. And I remember sometimes we would talk about short text segments, right? So we're talking about English language and we're talking about a couple word segments. And here's some interesting result that we advanced the state of the art on those segments. But we didn't quite say are those short words, number of words, is that a search query that we're dealing with, or is that the underlying part of a hypertext link, or where did that come from? For strategic reasons, we might not want to reveal something like that, and we might not want to say exactly how many computers we have in our data center. So we would, just take that number out and say it in terms of percentages, or say, we had this much data and this is twice as much. So for the reader of the paper, nothing has changed. For you as the author, you still get the paper out there. It still has all the important ideas. It can still be reproduced by your academic colleagues, but it doesn't give Google's competitors a leg up in certain cases for things that we don't want to share quite yet.
Okay. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Here's a good one. How can having PhD experience benefit both Google and me in doing a job or an internship? So let's say a PhD and an undergraduate both have strong linear algebra experience, maybe applying for a machine learning position of some kind. What is the difference between having that PhD experience versus either that undergrad experience or that kind of self-taught curriculum?
So I guess what we see in PhD is the ability to take a project over the long run, right? So as an undergraduate, you're kind of going one course at a time, and the biggest thing you work on is the final project for a class. As a PhD, you've shown you can stick with a problem over a number of years. And that's a great attribute, because we have hard problems and we want people that can work on them. And so having a PhD or being well on your way towards getting a PhD is a great way for you to demonstrate that you can do that. I guess about a quarter of the engineering staff is PhDs, so we like PhDs, we like what they can do, and we hire them. On the other hand, if you can do that without getting a PhD, then that's fine too. If what we're looking for is that capability, not necessarily the piece of paper.
Right. Okay, and one last question is there a difference in the application for either jobs or internships to do different kinds of software engineering? So for instance, front end versus back infrastructure versus whatever, right? I can answer this one actually. It comes up a lot, and it's interesting. There is, for software engineering at Google, there's usually that one application for either a full-time or an internship that is the one door into the whole company. So when you apply for software engineer PhD as a full-time position, that is the one job of application that you need to fill out. What will happen then is the recruiters will look at your qualifications, they'll look at your background, your focus area, your research area, and then as you go through the interview process, as I mentioned, you'll have to go through those technical interviews. That's when they'll start to say, okay, let's really start to focus and sharpen your marketing within the company as far as which team you're going to be placed on. Same kind of thing goes for internships. If you apply for that one internship application on the student job site, that's your one key that you need to the whole kingdom. Similarly, you'll do the technical interviews, and then in a host matching process, that's where they market you around and shop you around and say, okay, this team works great for that person. So it just kind of, that's where the matches are made. I think that's it. So, Peter, I want to thank you once again.
Thank you, Brandon.
This is lovely.
Thank you, audience.
So, one final plea: if you joined us late and haven't RSVP'd, please do sign in. The link is right underneath us in the information section for this video. So, good luck this fall. Our next session will be on machine learning research and development in our ads organization, and that's going to be on November 9th or 10th. At 12 p.m. Pacific or 3 p.m. Pacific, respectively. And just like yesterday and today, they're going to be run identically. So you don't have to go to both. You can pick whichever one works best for your schedules. So if you RSVP'd in that form, again, shameless plug for that little link down there, we'll send you the link to this, we'll send you the YouTube link for those events a day or two before they happen so that you're caught up and ready to go. But with that, thank you again all very much for watching, and hope to see you on campus or in the hallways here soon.
All right, thanks. So long.
Okay.
Okay.